The boardroom fell silent as I slid the acquisition papers across the mahogany table. My brother Marcus looked up from the documents, his face pale, then back down at the signature line that would transfer ownership of Richardson Tech Solutions to me. 23 years of family doubt, of being called the disappointment, of hearing, "You'll never amount to anything like Marcus." It all led to this moment. But let me take you back to where this story really began. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Growing up in suburban Phoenix, the Thompson household had an unspoken hierarchy. Marcus was 3 years older, the golden child who could do no wrong. By age 12, he was building computers from spare parts while I was still struggling with basic algebra. Our parents, David and Susan Thompson, never missed an opportunity to remind me of the gap between us. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. Marcus excelled at everything. Honor roll, debate team captain, early admission to Stanford with a full scholarship. Meanwhile, I barely scraped through high school with a 2.8 GPA and ended up at Phoenix Community College, studying business administration because I didn't know what else to do. Family dinners were torture sessions where Marcus would discuss his latest coding projects or internship opportunities while I sat quietly, picking at my food, waiting for the inevitable comparison. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving dinner my sophomore year of college. Marcus had just landed a prestigious internship at a Fortune 500 tech company, and our extended family was gathered around the table singing his praises. Uncle Robert, our father's brother who owned several successful restaurants, raised his wine glass and declared, "Here's to Marcus, the future millionaire of the family." Then he turned to me with that patronizing smile I'd grown to hate. "And here's to Jake, who, well, I'm sure you'll find your path eventually." The laughter that followed felt like a knife twisting in my chest, but it was what happened next that changed everything. My grandmother, Elena Thompson, pulled me aside after dinner. She was 82 years old, sharp as a tack, and had built a small fortune through real estate investments over the decades. "Jake," she said, her weathered hand gripping mine, "I've been watching you all these years. You see things differently than Marcus. He's brilliant with technology, but you understand people. You notice things others miss. Don't let their narrow definition of success blind you to your own potential." She reached into her purse and pulled out a check for $5,000. "This isn't charity," she said firmly. "It's an investment. But here's the catch. You can't tell anyone about this money. Not your parents, not Marcus, nobody. Use it to prove to yourself what I already know, that you're capable of extraordinary things." That night, I lay in my tiny dorm room staring at the check. $5,000 felt like a fortune to a broke college student, but I knew it wouldn't last long if I wasn't smart about it. I started thinking about what my grandmother had said about seeing things differently. She was right. While Marcus focused on the technical side of things, I'd always been drawn to understanding what people actually wanted and needed. The idea came to me during a particularly boring economics lecture. Professor Martinez was droning on about market inefficiencies when I started thinking about my own frustrations as a student. Textbooks were insanely expensive, often outdated by the time they hit the shelves, and most students ended up selling them back for pennies on the dollar. There had to be a better way. I spent the next 3 weeks researching the textbook market, talking to students, professors, and bookstore managers. What I discovered was fascinating. There was a massive disconnect between supply and demand, but more importantly, there was an opportunity that nobody was addressing. Students wanted current, relevant materials at reasonable prices, but they also wanted flexibility. Some preferred digital formats, others needed physical books, and many wanted both options. Using my grandmother's money, I started small. I created StudyBridge Solutions, initially just a website I built, using free templates and basic HTML skills I'd picked up. The concept was simple. Instead of competing directly with traditional textbook publishers, I would partner with professors to create supplementary study guides and practice materials that complemented their existing curriculum. My first client was Professor Martinez himself. After class one day, I approached him with a proposal. What if I could create a comprehensive study guide for your economics course that included real-world examples, practice problems, and visual aids that helped students actually understand the concepts instead of just memorizing them. He was skeptical at first, but when I showed him the sample materials I'd created, his attitude shifted completely. We agreed on a partnership where I would create custom study materials for his 3 economics courses. Students could purchase them for $15 each, far less than traditional textbooks, but enough to generate a decent profit margin. The key was volume and efficiency. I could create digital materials once and sell them to hundreds of students across multiple semesters. The first semester was rough. I worked 18-hour days, creating content, managing the website, handling customer service, and still trying to keep up with my own classes. I made plenty of mistakes. Technical glitches crashed the website twice. I underestimated printing costs for students who wanted physical copies, and my first attempts at marketing were laughably amateur. But something magical happened. Students started talking. Word spread that the StudyBridge materials actually helped them understand difficult concepts and improve their grades. Professor Martinez reported that his class averages increased by 12% that semester. Other professors began reaching out, curious about this new approach to supplementary educational materials. By the end of my junior year, StudyBridge Solutions was generating $15,000 per semester in revenue. I was working with 8 professors across 4 different subjects and had hired 2 part-time student assistants to help with content creation and customer service. The business was still small, but it was growing steadily, and, more importantly, it was solving real problems for real people. Meanwhile, Marcus had graduated from Stanford and landed a high-paying job at a major tech company in Silicon Valley. Family gatherings became slightly more tolerable as the focus shifted to his career achievements, but I was still viewed as the underachiever who was playing around with some little side business instead of focusing on getting a real job. The turning point came during Christmas break of my senior year. Marcus was home for the holidays, driving a brand new BMW and wearing expensive clothes that screamed success. During dinner, he casually mentioned that he was thinking about starting his own company. "The tech consulting market is booming," he said confidently. "I've got the connections, the skills, and some investors who are already interested. I'm thinking of calling it Richardson Tech Solutions." Our father practically beamed with pride. "That's fantastic, son, following in the entrepreneurial footsteps of your grandfather. Jake, you should pay attention. This is how you build real wealth." I nodded politely, but inside I was analyzing everything Marcus had said. Tech consulting was indeed booming, but it was also becoming increasingly commoditized. Everyone with a computer science degree thought they could start a consulting firm, which meant intense competition and razor-thin margins unless you had something truly unique to offer. Over the next few months, I watched from a distance as Marcus launched Richardson Tech Solutions. He secured a small office space, hired 2 junior developers, and began aggressively pursuing contracts with local businesses. The company got off to a promising start, landing several projects with mid-sized companies that needed help upgrading their systems or developing custom software solutions. But I noticed something that Marcus seemed to miss. He was building a business that completely depended on his personal involvement in every project. He was brilliant at solving technical problems, but he hadn't created systems that could scale beyond his own capabilities. Every new client meant more hours for Marcus personally, and there were only so many hours in a day. Meanwhile, StudyBridge Solutions continued to grow. I'd expanded beyond Arizona State, partnering with professors at 3 other universities. The digital nature of my business meant that growth didn't require a proportional increase in my personal time investment. Once materials were created for a course, they could be sold to unlimited students with minimal additional effort. 6 months after graduation, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of looking for a traditional job like everyone expected, I took StudyBridge Solutions full-time. The reaction from my family was predictably disappointing. My father cornered me at a barbecue and delivered one of his classic lectures about real careers and financial security. But the numbers told a different story. StudyBridge was now generating $48,000 annually, and I could see the path to much more. The breakthrough came when I realized I was thinking too small. While everyone else was focused on individual courses, I started looking at entire academic programs. What if instead of creating study guides for Professor Martinez's economics classes, I developed comprehensive learning systems for entire business schools? The scalability potential was enormous. I reached out to Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the Dean of Business at Northern Arizona University. She was initially skeptical when a 22-year-old college graduate requested a meeting to discuss revolutionizing business education. But something in my proposal intrigued her. I presented a complete learning ecosystem that would complement their traditional curriculum with interactive case studies, real-world simulations, and adaptive practice materials. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Dr. Hendricks grilled me on everything from learning theory to implementation logistics. But by the end, she was nodding thoughtfully. "This is exactly what we've been trying to achieve with our curriculum modernization initiative," she said. "We've spent 2 years and $300,000 with educational consultants who gave us beautiful reports and no practical solutions. Your approach is different." The contract we signed was worth $120,000 over 2 years. But more importantly, it established StudyBridge as a legitimate player in the educational technology space. Other universities began reaching out, curious about the, quote, innovative learning solutions that NAU was implementing. Within 18 months, I had contracts with 7 universities and had built a team of 12 people. We weren't just creating study guides anymore. We were developing complete educational ecosystems that improved student outcomes while reducing costs for institutions. The business was generating over $400,000 annually and growing at 30% quarterly. Meanwhile, Marcus was struggling with Richardson Tech Solutions in ways that weren't immediately obvious to our family. From the outside, everything looked successful. He'd moved to a larger office, expanded his team to 8 employees, and was regularly featured in local business publications as a rising tech entrepreneur. But I started noticing stress cracks during family gatherings. He would get phone calls during dinner that he couldn't ignore. He mentioned working weekends regularly. Most tellingly, he started making comments about difficult clients and cash flow challenges that suggested all wasn't as smooth as it appeared. The problem, as I saw it, was that Marcus had built a high-overhead business that required constant new client acquisition to stay profitable. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. Tech consulting sounds glamorous, but the reality is brutal. You're constantly competing on price with offshore development teams and younger, hungrier consultants willing to work for less. Every project has unique requirements, making it difficult to develop repeatable processes or predictable revenue streams. And clients often have unrealistic expectations about timelines and costs, leading to scope creep and squeezed margins. I began quietly researching Richardson Tech Solutions through public business records and industry connections I'd developed. What I discovered was concerning but not surprising. Despite appearing successful, the company was heavily leveraged and operating on thin margins. Marcus had taken significant loans to fund expansion, betting that growth would solve the underlying profitability issues. It was a dangerous strategy that many service-based businesses pursue, and most eventually hit a wall. The wall came sooner than expected. In early 2019, Richardson Tech Solutions lost 2 major clients within a month of each other. The first was a retail chain that decided to handle their technology upgrades internally after budget cuts. The second was a manufacturing company that was acquired by a larger corporation that already had established tech vendors. Combined, these losses represented nearly 40% of Richardson's monthly revenue. Marcus tried to hide the severity of the situation, but the signs were impossible to miss for someone who understood business fundamentals. He started talking about strategic restructuring and optimizing operations, corporate euphemisms for layoffs and cost-cutting. The stress was taking a visible toll on him, physically and emotionally. During a family dinner in March, my father asked Marcus about the new car he'd been considering. "Actually, I'm holding off on that for a while," Marcus replied, trying to sound casual. "Just being conservative with expenses right now." I caught the look of confusion that flashed across our parents' faces. Marcus had never been conservative with anything in his life. That's when I knew Richardson Tech Solutions was in serious trouble. While Marcus was fighting to keep his company afloat, StudyBridge Solutions was experiencing explosive growth. We'd secured a partnership with Pearson Education to develop adaptive learning modules for their digital textbook platform. The deal was worth $2 million over 3 years and positioned us as a major player in the educational technology industry. More importantly, I'd learned to build scalable systems that didn't depend entirely on my personal involvement. We'd developed proprietary software that could analyze student performance data and automatically adjust learning paths to optimize outcomes. This technology gave us a significant competitive advantage and created high barriers to entry for potential competitors. By late 2019, StudyBridge Solutions was generating $1.8 million annually with a 35% profit margin. We had 43 employees across 3 offices and were working with over 60 educational institutions. The business model was solid, scalable, and positioned for continued growth in a market that was rapidly embracing digital learning solutions. The contrast between my success and Marcus's struggles was becoming impossible to ignore, even for our parents. During Thanksgiving dinner that year, the conversation dynamics had shifted dramatically. Instead of praising Marcus and barely acknowledging me, both parents were asking detailed questions about StudyBridge's latest developments and growth plans. Marcus sat quietly through most of the dinner, responding politely when directly addressed, but lacking his usual confidence and enthusiasm. At one point, our mother mentioned an article she'd read about the challenges facing small consulting firms in competitive markets. The look of pain that crossed Marcus's face was unmistakable. After dinner, I found him alone on the back patio, staring out at the desert landscape. "Tough year?" I asked, sitting down beside him. He was quiet for a long moment before responding. "I thought it would be easier," he said finally. "All through school, everything came naturally. I figured business would be the same way. Apply intelligence and hard work, achieve success. But it's not that simple." "What's the biggest challenge?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. "Everything depends on me," he said. "Every client relationship, every technical decision, every business development opportunity." I thought hiring more people would solve that, but it just created more overhead without reducing my personal workload. If anything, I'm working more hours now than when I started. Quote, "It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had about business. And it confirmed what I'd suspected about Richardson Tech Solutions' fundamental structural problems. Marcus had built a job for himself, not a sustainable business. And now, that job was becoming increasingly difficult and stressful as market conditions tightened and competition intensified. "Have you considered pivoting the business model?" I asked. "Maybe focusing on developing proprietary software products instead of custom consulting services?" Marcus shook his head. "We'd need significant capital to fund product development, and we're already leveraged pretty heavily. Plus, I'm not sure we have the right team composition for product development. Most of our people are specialists in client services, not product engineering." That conversation planted a seed in my mind. Richardson Tech Solutions had valuable assets, experienced developers, established client relationships, and Marcus's technical expertise. But the business model was flawed, and the execution was suffering from common scaling problems that plague service-based companies. What if there was a way to preserve the valuable elements while fixing the structural issues? Over the next few months, I began developing a plan that seemed crazy on the surface, but made perfect sense when I analyzed the underlying fundamentals. Richardson Tech Solutions wasn't failing because it lacked potential. It was failing because it was built on an unsustainable foundation. With the right structural changes and strategic repositioning, it could become a valuable complement to StudyBridge Solutions' educational technology focus. The plan would require perfect timing, careful negotiation, and a level of strategic thinking that would surprise everyone who still saw me as the family underachiever. But if executed correctly, it would solve Marcus's problems while creating significant value for both companies. And it would prove, once and for all, that success isn't always about being the smartest person in the room. The opportunity to put my plan into action arrived sooner than expected. In January 2020, Marcus called me with news that would have devastated him 2 years earlier, but now sounded almost relieved. Jake, I need to talk to someone who understands business. Richardson Tech is in trouble, and I'm not sure what my options are. Quote, we met at a quiet coffee shop in Scottsdale, away from family and business associates who might overhear our conversation. Marcus looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, slightly wrinkled clothes that suggested he'd been sleeping at the office, and a nervous energy that was completely unlike his usual composed demeanor. 2 more clients terminated their contracts last week, he began without preamble. That puts us at about 60% of our revenue from 6 months ago. I've already laid off 3 people, but we're still bleeding money. The bank is asking questions about our loan payments, and I'm honestly not sure how much longer we can keep the doors open. I listened carefully as Marcus detailed the financial situation. It was worse than I'd estimated. Richardson Tech Solutions had accumulated nearly $400,000 in debt between equipment loans, office leases, and operational credit lines. Monthly expenses were running about $85,000, while revenue had dropped to roughly $70,000 per month. At that burn rate, the company had maybe 6 weeks before complete collapse. Have you considered bankruptcy? I asked, though I already knew his answer. Marcus shook his head firmly. That would destroy my professional reputation. Plus, I personally guaranteed most of the loans. Bankruptcy wouldn't solve the debt problem, it would just make everything worse. What about selling the company? To who? Marcus laughed bitterly. Nobody wants to buy a consulting firm that's losing money and losing clients. The only assets worth anything are our development team and some proprietary code we've written for clients. But that's not enough to cover the debts. This was exactly the opening I'd been hoping for, but I had to approach it carefully. If Marcus suspected I was trying to take advantage of his situation, he'd shut down immediately. Instead, I needed him to see me as a potential solution to his problems. What if I told you there might be another option? I said slowly. Something that could solve your immediate cash flow problems and preserve the valuable parts of what you've built? Marcus looked skeptical but curious. I'm listening. I spent the next hour outlining a preliminary acquisition proposal that I'd been developing for months. StudyBridge Solutions needed to expand beyond pure educational content into the technical infrastructure that supported online learning platforms. Richardson Tech's development expertise could accelerate that expansion while solving Marcus's financial crisis. The basic structure was straightforward. StudyBridge would acquire Richardson Tech Solutions assets, assume responsibility for existing client contracts, and retain key employees. Marcus would join StudyBridge as Chief Technology Officer, bringing his technical expertise while stepping away from the day-to-day business management that had been causing him so much stress. You're serious about this? Marcus asked when I finished explaining the proposal. Dead serious, but I'll need complete financial transparency to structure a fair deal. Tax returns, financial statements, client contracts, employee agreements, debt obligations, everything. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications. Finally, he looked up with an expression I'd never seen before, hope mixed with disbelief. You really think StudyBridge could absorb Richardson Tech without destroying either company? I think it could strengthen both companies, I replied honestly. Your technical capabilities fill a major gap in our service offerings, and our business model could provide the stability that Richardson Tech needs to thrive. Over the next 3 weeks, I conducted the most thorough due diligence investigation of my life. Marcus provided access to everything: financial records, client files, employee contracts, and operational data going back 3 years. What I discovered was both encouraging and challenging. On the positive side, Richardson Tech had developed some genuinely impressive proprietary software. Their client management system was more sophisticated than anything StudyBridge was using, and they'd created several automation tools that could significantly improve our operational efficiency. The development team was experienced and talented, even if they'd been underutilized due to the company's consulting focus. The client relationships, while reduced, were still valuable. Several companies had terminated contracts due to budget constraints, rather than dissatisfaction with Richardson Tech's work. In a more stable economic environment, those relationships could potentially be reactivated. However, the financial situation was even worse than Marcus had initially revealed. The company was technically insolvent, with liabilities exceeding assets by approximately $200,000. 3 major creditors were already threatening legal action, and the office lease included personal guarantees that would follow Marcus even if the company closed. Most challenging was the cultural integration question. Richardson Tech's employees were accustomed to working on diverse projects for different clients, while StudyBridge's team focused exclusively on educational technology solutions. Successfully merging the companies would require careful change management to align everyone around a unified mission and methodology. But the more I analyzed the situation, the more convinced I became that the acquisition made strategic sense. Richardson Tech's problems were primarily structural and financial, not operational or technical. With StudyBridge's stable revenue stream and scalable business model, the combined company could leverage Richardson Tech's capabilities while eliminating the cash flow volatility that had caused the original problems. The financial modeling took another week to complete. I wanted to structure a deal that was fair to Marcus while protecting StudyBridge's interests and ensuring the combined company's long-term viability. The final proposal included immediate debt assumption to prevent Richardson Tech's collapse, retention bonuses for key employees, and a 3-year earnout structure that would compensate Marcus based on the acquired division's performance. When I presented the formal offer to Marcus, his reaction surprised me. Instead of relief or gratitude, he looked almost angry. "This is really happening, isn't it?" he said, staring at the acquisition documents. "My little brother is buying my company." The tension in his voice made me realize I'd been so focused on the business logic that I'd overlooked the emotional dynamics. For Marcus, this wasn't just a financial transaction. It was a fundamental reversal of our lifelong roles. The brother who'd always been seen as less capable was now in a position to rescue the family's golden child. "Marcus, this isn't about proving anything or settling scores," I said carefully. "It's about creating value for both companies and preserving what you've built instead of watching it disappear." "But that's exactly what it is, isn't it?" Marcus replied, "You're saving me from my own mistakes." The successful little brother swooping in to rescue his failure of an older brother. I could see that Marcus was wrestling with more than just business considerations. His identity had been built around being the smart one, the successful one, the brother who had everything figured out. Accepting my acquisition offer meant acknowledging that dynamic had completely reversed. "Look," I said finally, "you can view this as a rescue mission or a business merger. But either way, Richardson Tech has value that StudyBridge needs, and StudyBridge has stability that Richardson Tech needs. We can let pride destroy both companies, or we can work together to build something stronger than either of us could create alone." Marcus spent another week considering the offer, during which time Richardson Tech's financial situation continued deteriorating. 2 more employees quit when their paychecks were delayed, and a major creditor filed a lien against the company's equipment. The window for a negotiated solution was rapidly closing. When Marcus finally called to accept the acquisition offer, his voice was steady but subdued. "I want to make sure our employees are protected," he said. "These people trusted me with their careers, and I don't want them to suffer because of my mistakes." "That's already built into the deal structure," I assured him. "Everyone who wants to stay will have a position with the combined company, and we're including retention bonuses to make sure we don't lose key talent during the transition." "And the clients?" "We'll honor all existing contracts and reach out to former clients about resuming their relationships under the new structure. Your reputation for technical excellence is one of the assets we're acquiring." The final negotiations took place in a conference room at my attorney's office. Marcus arrived with his own legal counsel, and we spent 6 hours working through contract details, liability assignments, and transition timelines. By the end of the day, we'd signed the papers that transferred ownership of Richardson Tech Solutions to StudyBridge Holdings, the parent company I'd created to manage the acquisition. As we walked out of the building, Marcus turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You know, I always thought you were just lucky," he said. "Lucky to find a business idea that worked. Lucky to avoid the challenges I was facing. But this whole process, the way you analyzed Richardson Tech's problems, structured the acquisition, managed the negotiations, that wasn't luck." "No," I agreed, "it wasn't. So when did you get so smart about business?" Quote, "I thought about that question as we stood on the sidewalk outside the law office, When had I learned to see opportunities that others missed? When had I developed the confidence to make bold strategic moves? When had I stopped being the disappointing younger brother and become someone capable of acquiring his older brother's company? I think I always was, I said finally. I just needed to find the right arena to prove it. The first day of the merged company almost ended in disaster. I arrived at Richardson Tech's office at 7 a.m. to address the combined staff, expecting to find a team ready to embrace new opportunities. Instead, I walked into a room full of suspicious faces and crossed arms. Word had spread that the the study guide business was taking over, and Richardson Tech's developers weren't impressed. Sarah Chen, the lead software architect, spoke for the group. No offense, Jake, but we've been building enterprise-level systems for Fortune 500 companies. We're not interested in creating flashcards for college students. The murmur of agreement from her colleagues made it clear she wasn't speaking only for herself. This was the moment I realized that acquiring a company and successfully integrating it were completely different challenges. On paper, the merger made perfect sense. In reality, I was asking experienced professionals to completely reimagine their work, while trusting a 24-year-old they'd never heard of until 3 weeks ago. You're right, I said, abandoning the presentation I'd prepared. You have been building enterprise systems, and they've been impressive. The client management platform you developed for Harrison Manufacturing processes over 50,000 transactions daily without a glitch. The automated reporting system for Mesa Financial has reduced their compliance costs by 30%. These aren't flashcard projects. Sarah looked surprised that I knew specific details about their work. Then why do you want us to switch to educational software? Because educational technology is about to become the largest software market in history, I replied. The pandemic has accelerated digital learning adoption by at least 5 years. Universities are investing billions in online infrastructure. Corporate training programs are shifting entirely to digital platforms. And right now, most of the software powering this transformation is garbage. Quote. I pulled up a presentation I'd been saving for this exact moment, a comprehensive analysis of the educational technology market that my team had spent months researching. The numbers were staggering. Global spending on educational software was projected to reach $150 billion by 2025, with growth rates exceeding 30% annually. But here's the problem, I continued. Most educational software is built by educators who don't understand technology, or by technologists who don't understand learning. We have both sides covered. StudyBridge understands how people actually learn, and Richardson Tech knows how to build software that scales. Together, we can dominate a market that nobody else truly understands. The atmosphere in the room began to shift as the developers realized the scope of the opportunity. Marcus, who had been silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke up. Jake's right about the market potential. I've been so focused on chasing individual consulting contracts that I missed the bigger picture. This isn't about abandoning what we've built. It's about applying our expertise to a much larger opportunity. Over the following weeks, I implemented an integration strategy that preserved Richardson Tech's technical culture while aligning everyone around StudyBridge's educational mission. Instead of forcing immediate changes, I created cross-functional teams that paired StudyBridge's educational specialists with Richardson Tech's developers. Each team was assigned to redesign one component of our existing platform, giving the developers hands-on experience with educational technology, while improving our products. The breakthrough came when Sarah Chen's team tackled our student assessment system. Within 2 weeks, they'd completely reimagined how we collected and analyzed learning data, creating real-time analytics that could identify struggling students before they failed assignments. The system was so sophisticated that 3 universities immediately requested pilot programs, generating over $200,000 in new contracts. This is actually more complex than most corporate systems I've worked on, Sarah admitted during a team meeting. Educational data has unique challenges: privacy requirements, accessibility standards, integration with legacy campus systems. It's intellectually demanding in ways I hadn't expected. But the real validation came from our clients. Dr. Patricia Hendricks from Northern Arizona University visited our offices to see the expanded development team in action. After watching a demonstration of the new assessment platform, she pulled me aside with an offer that would change everything. Jake, NAU is launching a consortium of Western universities focused on shared digital learning infrastructure. We're talking about a 5-year, $50 million initiative to build next-generation educational technology. Based on what I've seen here today, I want StudyBridge to be our primary development partner. The consortium contract required capabilities that neither StudyBridge nor Richardson Tech could have handled independently. We needed to build learning management systems, student information platforms, virtual classroom environments, and assessment tools that could serve over 300,000 students across 12 universities. The technical complexity was enormous, but so was the revenue potential, $10 million annually for 5 years. Marcus threw himself into the project with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen since college. Working with our educational specialists, he designed a modular architecture that could adapt to each university's unique requirements, while maintaining consistency across the entire consortium. It was exactly the kind of challenging, large-scale project that showcased his technical brilliance. Meanwhile, I focused on scaling our business development capabilities to handle the influx of opportunities. The consortium contract had established StudyBridge as a major player in educational technology, and other institutions began approaching us with their own large-scale projects. We were getting requests for corporate training platforms, K-12 learning systems, and specialized educational tools for everything from medical schools to technical certification programs. By the end of 2020, the combined company was generating over $8 million in annual revenue with a 42% profit margin. We'd grown from 55 employees to 130, with offices in Phoenix, Denver, and Austin. Richardson Tech's developers had become the technical backbone of our expanded operations, while StudyBridge's educational expertise guided product development and client relationships. The success was gratifying, but the real satisfaction came from watching Marcus rediscover his confidence. Instead of struggling with cash flow problems and difficult clients, he was leading a team of talented developers in building software that genuinely improved how people learned. His technical innovations were being implemented at universities across the country, affecting tens of thousands of students. During our first annual company meeting, Marcus addressed the entire staff about the transformation both companies had undergone. A year ago, Richardson Tech was failing because we were trying to be everything to everyone, he said. We took whatever projects came along, whether they aligned with our strengths or not, but focus creates power. When you combine technical excellence with deep market knowledge and clear strategic direction, you can build something truly significant. The applause from our employees was genuine and enthusiastic. They'd watched both companies struggle with different challenges and had seen how the merger created opportunities that neither could have achieved alone. More importantly, they were proud of the work they were doing, building software that made education more effective and accessible. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came during a family dinner in late December. Our parents were discussing the company's rapid growth and recent recognition in several business publications. For the first time in our lives, Marcus and I were being talked about as equals, two brothers who had built something successful together. You know what I find most impressive, our father said, looking between Marcus and me? It's not just the financial success, though that's obviously gratifying. It's that you found a way to combine your different strengths. Marcus brings technical expertise and attention to detail. Jake brings strategic vision and market understanding. Neither of you could have built what you've created together working alone. After dinner, Marcus and I found ourselves back on the patio, where we'd had our honest conversation about Richardson Tech struggles almost 2 years earlier. But this time the mood was completely different. I owe you an apology, Marcus said quietly. When you first proposed the acquisition, I was so caught up in my own pride that I almost missed what you were really offering. You weren't trying to rescue me or prove you were smarter. You saw potential that I couldn't see and had the vision to bring it together. We both learned things we didn't know before, I replied. You learned that technical brilliance needs strategic direction to create sustainable value. I learned that ambitious visions need technical excellence to become reality. The combination is more powerful than either element alone. Marcus nodded, then smiled with genuine warmth. So what's next for the Thompson brothers? I pulled out my phone and showed him an email I'd received that afternoon. Microsoft wants to discuss a potential partnership for their new education initiative. They're looking for a company that understands both technology and learning to help them develop the next generation of classroom software. How big are we talking? Big enough that we'll need to expand our development team by 50% and open a new office in Seattle. Big enough that StudyBridge Holdings might become one of the most significant educational technology companies in the country. Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. 5 years ago, I thought success meant building the biggest consulting firm in Arizona. Now we're talking about reshaping how education works across the entire country. Funny how perspective changes when you stop competing with each other and start working toward the same goal, I observed. Speaking of goals, Marcus said with a grin, when are you going to tell Mom and Dad that their disappointing younger son is about to become the CEO of a $100 million company? I laughed, remembering all the family dinners where I'd sat quietly while everyone praised Marcus's achievements. I think I'll let the actions speak for themselves. After all, that's what got us here in the first place. The Microsoft meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in February 2021, but the call that would define our company's future came on the Friday before. I was reviewing quarterly projections when my assistant knocked on my office door with an expression that meant urgent news. Jake, there's a Rebecca Morrison from Microsoft on line 1. She says it's about your meeting next week, and she sounds intense. Rebecca Morrison was Microsoft's Director of Educational Partnerships, and her reputation in the industry was legendary. She'd negotiated deals worth billions of dollars and had a track record of identifying promising companies before they became household names. Getting on her radar meant StudyBridge had reached a new level of legitimacy. Mr. Thompson, she began without pleasantries, I need to be direct with you. We've been tracking StudyBridge's progress for the past 18 months, and we're impressed. But our Tuesday meeting isn't just a casual partnership discussion. Microsoft is launching the most ambitious educational technology initiative in our company's history, and we're looking for one primary development partner. The contract could be worth $200 million over 7 years. I felt my heart rate spike but kept my voice steady. That's a significant opportunity. What's the timeline for decision-making? We're meeting with 3 companies over the next 2 weeks. StudyBridge, EduTech Solutions out of Boston, and Classroom Dynamics from San Francisco. All 3 have impressive track records, but only one will get the contract. The decision will be final by month end. After hanging up, I immediately called Marcus into my office. When I explained the situation, his reaction was characteristically analytical. $200 million over 7 years means we'd need to expand our development capacity by at least 300%, he said. That's not just hiring more people. We'd need entirely new infrastructure, quality assurance systems, and project management capabilities. Can we do it? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, mentally calculating technical requirements and resource allocation. Technically, yes, but it would transform StudyBridge into a completely different company. We'd go from being a mid-sized educational technology firm to one of the major players in the entire software industry. The next 4 days were a blur of preparation, unlike anything we'd ever attempted. I assembled our best people into a dedicated presentation team, while Marcus worked with our technical leads to develop architectural blueprints for Microsoft's proposed platform. We had 72 hours to create a proposal that would convince one of the world's largest technology companies that StudyBridge was their ideal partner. The challenge was enormous. Microsoft wanted to build an integrated learning ecosystem that could serve students from kindergarten through graduate school, supporting both traditional classroom instruction and fully online education. The platform needed to handle millions of simultaneous users while providing personalized learning experiences, advanced analytics, and seamless integration with existing school systems. Our competitors had significant advantages. EduTech Solutions was 3 times our size, with established relationships at major universities across the East Coast. Classroom Dynamics had recently gone public and had the financial resources to scale rapidly. Both companies had more experience with enterprise-level implementations and larger development teams. But we had something they didn't: the unique combination of deep educational expertise and technical innovation that had driven our success from the beginning. More importantly, we had the agility to move quickly, and the hunger that comes from knowing this opportunity could define our company's future. The Microsoft campus in Redmond was intimidating in a way I hadn't expected. Walking through halls lined with the achievements of one of history's most successful technology companies made our small Arizona operation feel insignificant. But Marcus reminded me of something important as we approached the conference room. They called us. They see potential in what we've built, or we wouldn't be here. The presentation lasted 3 hours. Rebecca Morrison led a team of 12 Microsoft executives, including representatives from their education division, enterprise sales, product development, and technical architecture groups. They asked detailed questions about everything from our development methodologies to our financial projections to our plans for international expansion. The turning point came when Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, Microsoft's Chief Learning Officer, asked about our approach to adaptive learning technologies. This was Marcus's moment to shine. He walked them through our proprietary algorithms that analyzed student behavior patterns and automatically adjusted content difficulty, pacing, and presentation style to optimize learning outcomes. Most adaptive learning systems are reactive, Marcus explained. They wait for students to struggle before providing help. Our approach is predictive. We identify potential learning obstacles before students encounter them and proactively adjust the experience to prevent frustration and confusion. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward with obvious interest. Can you demonstrate this technology? Marcus pulled up a live demonstration using anonymized data from one of our university partners. The system showed how it tracked thousands of micro-interactions, how long students spent reading each paragraph, which practice problems they attempted multiple times, where they paused while watching video content, and used that data to create individualized learning paths. This student, Marcus said, pointing to a specific data profile, is struggling with calculus concepts but excelling at practical applications. The system automatically provides more theoretical foundation while accelerating through problem-solving exercises. This student has the opposite pattern, so they get more hands-on practice and less conceptual explanation. The room was silent as the Microsoft team absorbed the implications. Rebecca Morrison finally spoke. This is significantly more sophisticated than what your competitors showed us. How long have you been developing this technology? 3 years of continuous refinement across 67 educational institutions, I replied. We've processed learning data from over 400,000 students and continuously improved our algorithms based on real-world outcomes. The questions continued for another hour, covering implementation timelines, support capabilities, and partnership structures. By the end of the meeting, I felt cautiously optimistic but knew the competition would be fierce. The waiting period was excruciating. Microsoft had said they'd announce their decision by month-end, but as February 28th approached with no communication, I began preparing for disappointment. EduTech Solutions had a strong existing relationship with Microsoft's enterprise division, and Classroom Dynamics had recently announced a major funding round that demonstrated their growth potential. The call came at 4:47 p.m. on March 1st. Rebecca Morrison's voice was professional, but I detected a hint of excitement. Jake, congratulations. Microsoft has selected StudyBridge as our primary educational technology partner. The next few minutes were a blur of contract details and implementation timelines. The partnership would begin with a pilot program serving 500,000 students across 20 school districts. If successful, it would expand to Microsoft's full educational customer base, over 50 million students worldwide. But the most significant aspect wasn't the financial terms. Microsoft was essentially betting their educational technology strategy on our ability to deliver. Success would establish StudyBridge as one of the dominant forces in educational software. Failure would be very public and very damaging. After hanging up, I sat alone in my office for several minutes, processing what had just happened. 5 years earlier, I'd been a struggling college student with a $5,000 check from my grandmother. Now I was committing to deliver software that would impact the education of millions of students. The celebration that evening was subdued by the magnitude of the challenge ahead. Marcus was already deep in planning mode, calculating the infrastructure investments and team expansion we'd need to execute successfully. We'll need to hire at least 200 developers over the next 18 months, he said. And not just any developers. We need people with experience in large-scale distributed systems and real-time data processing. Can we find that many qualified people? Not in Phoenix, Marcus replied. We'll need to open development centers in Seattle, Austin, and probably somewhere on the East Coast. This project will require talent from across the entire country. The human resources challenge was staggering, but it was also an opportunity to build something extraordinary. Instead of competing for the same pool of experienced educational technology developers, we could recruit top-tier software engineers from other industries and train them in our educational methodology. Over the next 6 months, StudyBridge transformed from a regional success story into a national technology company. We opened offices in 4 new cities, hired over 300 employees, and invested $15 million in infrastructure and development tools. The Microsoft project alone required more computing resources than our entire previous operation. But the most satisfying aspect was watching our team rise to meet the challenge. Sarah Chen, who had initially been skeptical about working on educational software, became the lead architect for Microsoft's adaptive learning engine. Her innovative approach to real-time data processing earned recognition from Microsoft's own engineering teams. Marcus thrived in his role as Chief Technology Officer, coordinating development across multiple offices while maintaining the technical excellence that had become our signature. The shy, stressed consultant who had struggled with Richardson Tech's problems had evolved into a confident leader managing one of the most complex software projects in the educational technology industry. The pilot program launched in September 2021 with minimal fanfare but maximum anxiety. 50,000 students across 5 school districts began using our platform for their daily coursework. For the first week, Marcus and I barely slept, monitoring system performance and user feedback around the clock. But the results exceeded our most optimistic projections. Student engagement increased by 37% compared to previous learning management systems. Teachers reported that the adaptive features saved them hours of grading time while providing more detailed insights into student progress. Most importantly, learning outcomes improved measurably. Test scores increased, assignment completion rates rose, and student satisfaction surveys showed significantly higher ratings. By December, Microsoft was ready to accelerate the rollout. The partnership expanded to include corporate training platforms and international educational markets. StudyBridge Holdings was generating over $40 million in annual revenue and had become one of the fastest-growing companies in Arizona. The transformation was complete, but the real victory wasn't financial. It was proving that vision, persistence, and strategic thinking could overcome any initial disadvantage. The family dynamics that had once defined our lives, the smart brother and the disappointing one, had been replaced by a partnership that leveraged our complementary strengths to achieve something neither of us could have accomplished alone. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stood in the same Phoenix boardroom where this journey had begun, but now the tables had literally turned. 3 years after acquiring Richardson Tech Solutions, I was facing a room full of potential acquirers who wanted to buy StudyBridge Holdings. The company that had started with my grandmother's $5,000 check was now valued at $800 million. Amazon's education division had flown in from Seattle. Google's enterprise team had sent their senior vice president. Even Apple had quietly expressed interest through intermediaries. But the most intriguing offer had come from an unexpected source. Pearson Education, the same textbook giant we'd once competed against, was proposing a merger that would create the largest educational technology company in North America. The combined entity would serve over 200 million students globally, explained Catherine Walsh, Pearson's CEO, as she outlined their vision. StudyBridge's adaptive technology, integrated with Pearson's content library and distribution network, could revolutionize education at a scale we've never seen before. The numbers were staggering. The proposed merger valued StudyBridge at $1.2 billion, with Marcus and me retaining operational control while gaining access to Pearson's global infrastructure. It was the kind of exit that entrepreneurs dream about: financial security for multiple generations, and the resources to impact education worldwide. But something felt incomplete about the timing. StudyBridge was hitting its stride, with the Microsoft partnership generating massive growth and new opportunities emerging constantly. Walking away now would mean leaving the most exciting phase of the company's development to others. After the Pearson team left, Marcus and I retreated to my office to process what we'd heard. $1 billion valuation, he said, shaking his head in amazement. 5 years ago, I was worried about making payroll. Now we're turning down offers that would make us generationally wealthy. Are we crazy for not jumping at this? I asked, genuinely uncertain about the right decision. Marcus considered the question carefully before responding. Remember what you told me when you first proposed acquiring Richardson Tech? You said it wasn't about proving anything or settling scores. It was about creating value and building something meaningful. The same logic applies here. He was right, but the pressure to sell was intense. Our employees held stock options that would make many of them millionaires. Our investors, including the venture capital firm that had backed our expansion, were pushing hard for an exit. Even our families were struggling to understand why we'd hesitate when presented with such extraordinary offers. The decision crystallized during an unexpected encounter at a conference in Denver. I was presenting StudyBridge's latest innovations to a crowd of education administrators when a woman approached me afterward with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "I need to tell you what your software has done for my daughter. Emma has struggled with learning disabilities her entire academic career. Traditional teaching methods left her frustrated and behind her classmates. But your adaptive platform identified her specific learning patterns and adjusted the content in ways that finally made sense to her. For the first time in her life, she's succeeding academically." The woman pulled out her phone and showed me a video of her daughter explaining a complex science concept with confidence and enthusiasm. Emma recorded this last week to show her grandfather what she learned in biology class. 6 months ago, she was failing. Today, she's one of the top students in her grade. That conversation reminded me why we'd started this company in the first place. It wasn't about financial returns or market valuations. It was about solving real problems for real people and making education more effective and accessible. The acquisition offers represented validation of our business success, but they also meant stepping away from the work that had driven us from the beginning. 2 weeks later, I called Catherine Walsh with our decision. "We appreciate Pearson's generous offer," I told her, "but StudyBridge isn't for sale. We believe we're just getting started with what's possible in educational technology." Her response was gracious, but surprised. "Jake, you're walking away from guaranteed financial security to bet on uncertain future growth. Are you sure you've thought this through completely?" "Actually, we're betting on certain continued impact," I replied. "The financial security is attractive, but the opportunity to reshape education is irreplaceable." The decision to remain independent required a fundamental shift in how we thought about the company's future. Instead of preparing for an exit, we needed to build for sustained long-term growth. That meant developing new products, expanding into international markets, and creating organizational structures that could scale beyond our personal involvement. Marcus threw himself into research and development with renewed energy. He assembled a team of the best engineers we'd ever hired and challenged them to reimagine educational technology from the ground up. "We're not trying to improve existing systems," he told them during their first meeting. "We're trying to invent entirely new ways for people to learn." Quote, "The breakthrough came 18 months later with the launch of StudyBridge Neural, an artificial intelligence system that could understand natural language questions and provide personalized tutoring in real time. Unlike chatbots that provided generic responses, Neural understood context, learning history, and individual student needs well enough to provide guidance that rivaled human tutors." The demonstration videos went viral within hours of being posted online. Students were having natural conversations with AI tutors who could explain complex concepts, provide encouragement during difficult problems, and adapt their teaching style to match each learner's preferences. Teachers were amazed by the system's ability to identify struggling students and provide targeted interventions before problems became critical. Major universities began implementing StudyBridge Neural as quickly as we could scale the infrastructure to support them. International education ministries started inquiring about nationwide deployments. The technology that had begun as an experiment in adaptive learning had evolved into something that could genuinely transform How Humans Acquire Knowledge. By late 2024, StudyBridge Holdings was generating over $200 million in annual revenue and serving 43 million students across 6 continents. We'd become exactly what Catherine Walsh had predicted, the largest educational technology company in North America, but we'd achieved it through organic growth rather than acquisition. The personal transformation was equally dramatic. The family dynamics that had defined our childhood were now ancient history. Marcus and I were recognized as co-founders of one of the most innovative companies in the technology industry. Speaking requests came from conferences worldwide. Business schools wrote case studies about our strategic decisions and growth trajectory. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. In December 2024, Arizona State University announced that they were establishing the Thompson Institute for Educational Innovation, funded by a $50 million endowment from StudyBridge Holdings. The institute would research new learning methodologies and develop technologies to make education more effective and accessible globally. At the dedication ceremony, Dr. Patricia Hendricks, who had become a close friend and advisor over the years, introduced Marcus and me to the assembled crowd. The Thompson brothers represent something unique in the technology industry, she said. They've built a company that prioritizes impact over profits and innovation over incremental improvements. The Thompson Institute will continue that mission long after StudyBridge's specific technologies become obsolete. As we stood together on the stage where I'd once struggled through basic business courses, the complete reversal of our circumstances felt surreal. The brother who'd been dismissed as academically inadequate was now funding research that could influence education for generations. The company that had started with study guides for economics classes was now shaping how millions of people learned across every subject imaginable. But the moment that brought everything full circle happened later that evening, during the reception following the ceremony. My grandmother, now 89 years old and still sharp as ever, approached me with the same mischievous smile she'd worn when she handed me that first $5,000 check. "Jake," she said, "I have a confession to make. When I gave you that money 15 years ago, I knew you had potential that others couldn't see. But I never imagined you'd use it to build something this significant." "You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself," I replied. "That investment changed everything." "No," she said firmly, "you changed everything. The money was just a catalyst. Your vision, persistence, and willingness to think differently. That's what built StudyBridge. That's what turned you from the family disappointment into someone who's improving education for millions of people." As the evening wound down, Marcus and I found ourselves alone in the empty auditorium where the ceremony had taken place. The weight of how far we'd traveled professionally and personally settled over us in the quiet space. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't acquired Richardson Tech?" Marcus asked. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I think we would have found a way to work together eventually. The combination of our different strengths was too powerful to ignore indefinitely." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "You know what I've learned through all of this? Success isn't about being the smartest person in the room or having the best credentials. It's about understanding problems that others miss, and having the courage to pursue solutions that others think are impossible." Quote, "And sometimes," I added, "it's about being patient enough to prove that the people who doubted you were wrong, not to spite them, but to show them that potential comes in many different forms." As we walked out of the auditorium together, I thought about all the family dinners where I'd sat quietly while everyone celebrated Marcus's achievements. Now our roles weren't defined by who was succeeding and who was struggling. We were partners in something larger than either of us could have imagined when this journey began. The boy who was told he'd never be rich like his brother had indeed become wealthy, but more importantly, he'd found a way to use that success to make a lasting difference in the world. And that, I realized, was the real victory. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.